We live in a world of 7.9 billion people. We live in a time where people can communicate with other people across the planet. There are entire online communities filled with like-minded people with similar interests. Saying that the world is more interconnected than ever is an understatement. But there are still those out there who feel isolated, alone.
That's a huge question. Typically from like a sociological perspective, you think about the lack of community, the lack of connection to others. In kind of like classical sociological theory, you think about Durkheim and like this idea of social isolation. And so when I think about being alone, I think not just about like being alone in a space, but I also think about being alone socially and feeling that kind of disconnect.
You know, some people like sitting with themselves and they like that sense of just absence of people around them. You know, you'll talk about people having a social battery and all that stuff, and they're like, hey, I like the idea of being alone. However, people sometimes don't necessarily like that, and then they feel alone. They feel as if this is not right.
I mean, I'm thinking about kind of current events, things like climate disasters make people not only individually kind of isolated, but also socially isolated in ways that can be completely detrimental to their well-being and their happiness. So things like climate events, but also things like loss, of course, are huge in terms of impacting people's kind of comfort level in reaching out, in feelings of belonging, things like that. I also think that more generally, aging plays a role. I think especially with kind of college students, it's their first time going into a less structured environment to where all of a sudden there's more feelings of isolation, more feelings of aloneness, because they don't have the kind of schedule that you would normally see with K through 12. And so that's kind of the first moment in aging where we see people experiencing this kind of feeling of aloneness and isolation.
Certain events in childhood definitely can make people feel alone. You know, the way someone's brought up parenting-wise, it could be a friend that they had in middle school that had a falling out with them, and that's why they're alone now. Or the way they were brought up with family members, they felt better that to be alone than to be with other people, if that makes sense.
I know that I've experienced a few myself. Loss is a huge one, whether it's I've been married and I've been divorced, and I know that that loss of a relationship can lead people to feel, to kind of go more inward instead of like being more of an external focusing type individual. Loss of relationships, loss of pride. You know, sometimes, you know, you have a loss of status, you know, you get your setbacks and things like that. I think that can play into it as well.
I think there's so many reasons. I think gender is a huge one. Obviously, someone that studies gender. I think specifically men just struggle with feeling like it's socially appropriate to ask for help. And a lot of that is their prior socialization, their prior experiences. I know even like personal experience, my father is not and has never been interested in asking for help. It took, I think, gosh, how old is he? Probably 60 years for him to say, okay, yeah, maybe therapy isn't a bad thing. And that is not uncommon. For men especially, the social pressure, figuring it out on their own is so heavy. It's such a burden. And so I think you have gender, I also think you have race and the kind of historic mistrust and exploitation of people of color for medical use in the US. And so I think that people of color, specifically Black populations in the US, don't want to reach out because it's scary. There's these stories, these kind of narratives that they've heard their whole lives, and in a lot of cases have also experienced that kind of racist ideology within their own lives, be it at doctors or not.
I know with, like the United States, for example, we're more of a individualistic culture where you just kind of, you figure it out yourself, If it was more of a collectivist culture, I would think that maybe there would be more of a tendency to be like, hey, hey, village, come help support me. We're all in this together. But I think here we have more of like, all right, dug myself into this situation, I'll figure out how to dig myself out, I guess. Whether the fire department's right there, I know I'm burning, I'll figure out a way to put it out instead. I don't know. I think maybe there's like the pros and cons of being so individualistic plays into that.
I think it's two things. I think it's pride. It could be prideful. People don't like admitting when they have issues and they have problems. And then the flip side of that is they feel as if they're inconveniencing. So you can have both in the same person. I could be someone who's prideful that I don't need help. And at the same time, some of that pride is coming from like, I don't want to inconvenience anyone. I'm not an inconvenience. So I think we put a standard on other people that you go ask for help, you do this, you deserve this. However, when it comes to ourselves, we don't expect the same thing. We seem burdensome. So I think that's like the main two factors that play into it.
Alone in a group. Okay. I can say that sometimes even being a student in this university, where I'm a non-traditional student, and I'm a UNG student just like anyone else, but then I'll sit in a class and like as a unconventional veteran student, or however you want to like categorize me, I feel like I'm in the group, but I'm also kind of alone because of whatever perceived experiences that I might have that others may not, but like I really don't know. But it's just like that sense, that feeling of being alone, like you had spoken about earlier, where there may not be any reason to feel alone. It's just like a sense of it, I guess. But I think that happens, it's prevalent when people are in unfamiliar situations, and that's just kind of a natural feeling, maybe.
Oh, that's such a good question. Okay. Middle school. Middle school, I feel like, is one of those classic time frames in kids' lives where they're figuring out who they are, who they want to be, and are trying to kind of navigate how they fit. So I remember I went to private school for middle school. It was a Episcopal private school, and there were 8 of us, I think, in my class, in like our whole grade. And me and one other girl were deemed like the poor kids because we were both on scholarship. And so we had like one day a month where we got to wear our regular clothes. And it was the biggest deal in middle school. Like, what do you expect? So it was the biggest deal, and everyone would show up in these same exact outfits, the same exact name brands. And me and my friend, who were the scholarship kids, would show up in like the Walmart version of the outfit. And I remember it being such kind of an impactful learning experience. The first time I really thought it through, the first time I thought, oh wow, this is like, making me feel like I'm not a part of this. And I remember thinking, like, my friend, I'm sure, felt the same way. And I remember it just being kind of this light bulb moment where I was like, oh, wow, social class plays a big role in whether or not, I feel like these people are my friends.
So you would say that whole experience kind of like made you feel as if you were the other, you were other.
Absolutely. Yeah. And kind of felt like I had to kind of be more careful, be more thoughtful about how I presented myself, because I knew that however I would like introduce myself, talk about my family, would be seen through a certain lens. And so it felt really isolating.
So when I first started college here, I was surrounded by people that had very different childhoods than what I had. It's awesome. It's great. But, talking about experiences and stuff like that, I definitely sat with myself and I felt alone, because I didn't want to bring up like, I can't really relate to what you're talking about because of this, and then they felt bad. If that makes sense. So I felt alone in that group.
In 2022, there were 49,476 deaths by suicide and 1.6 million suicide attempts in the US. Why are these rates so horrifically high?
I think there's a few factors. I think when you look at the data, masculinity is a big part of it. And the social expectation for men to figure it out on their own. And we don't provide anyone, let alone men, especially not men, with resources needed to do that. And so we don't have the kind of language needed. We don't have the availability of mental health resources. It's not expected for men. And then men are also much more likely to own firearms and have access to and knowledge of firearms. Because of that, they're more likely to die by suicide by using firearms. And so those things kind of get intertwined in a way that we haven't yet figured out how to untangle and how to treat. Right? We've, I think, done a decent job with addressing the fact that there is a mental health crisis with men, but we haven't done much to change the social aspects that creates those conditions in the first place.
So I had a good friend of mine. She was going through it, but eventually took someone advocating for her to then realize she needed help, and then that's when she decided to take the further steps to get the help that she needed. But that was through, counseling, therapy, and it's not like a quick, easy thing. Like, she went through multiple months of a specific type of therapy to help her get through that issue.
Certainly. As a veteran, I know plenty of colleagues that have dealt with either losses of life or losses of other, just have some sort of PTSD or some sort of symptoms because of just the things they experienced. A lot of it was allowing themselves, and I'm going to count myself among this as well, allowing themselves to kind of be vulnerable for a moment and say, hey, listen, I'm not alone in this. I can speak of several people that have, because of that, felt so empowered that they went on to try and encourage others that they saw might be in states of distress as well. And just same sort of thing. They've kind of dug deep, kind of were able to get help where they needed to get help. Like, they got sought therapy, read the right books, just kind of like listened to the right people, and just kind of like, just kind of like changed the way they thought about things, and then behaved a little bit differently, and then just kind of like channeled that and tried to like, I guess, spread that goodwill elsewhere.
For instance, I had a friend whose mother passed away when he was 14. He was 14. He was a freshman in high school. And she died in a car accident. And it was, she was a single mom, and he was the only child. And he, of course, as any 14-year-old, didn't know how to handle it. And none of us, being 14, 15, knew how to provide him with the support he needed. And so one of the things that I think was helpful for him, after we kind of figured out that it was a serious issue in terms of he was expressing feelings of hopelessness, suicide, we connected him with the school counselor. And while our counselor was not the best, she did help us get him to a mental health professional that could help, right? So he was able to go to therapy and have that kind of experience that was beneficial, but it took some bureaucratic strings to pull, and that I think was and is normally a big barrier there too.
I know it sounds so cheesy, but like, you're not alone. People can get to a place where they literally, all they hear is themselves, and like they see like themselves so separate and disassociated from everyone around them. And I know it's like hard to come to reality, but if you're able to take that step forward to realize and look at yourself and realize you need help, then doing that is like the next step. Like, you are not alone. Everyone around you is going through something. They might not be as visible to you because you've had that separation, but I bet you so much money if you were to go to your friend or someone that you felt remotely close to, they would, have an instance and resources to help you.
People say the thoughts and prayers and all that and all those cliche things, but I feel like if you're really wanting to convey that you do care and you are actually there trying to like I would say that you're not alone, or in the same sort of context, I'm here, same sort of thing, that you're not alone, but like just so the person knows that they don't have to be alone through that journey.
So many times we lose ourselves in the kind of chaos of the social world, and it makes us feel even more isolated. I think one of the things that is always comforting to me when I'm having kind of like depressive episodes or feelings is that we all, like most humans, don't know what they're doing. And the old saying that, like, I feel like my parents told me this when I was a kid, like, imagine everyone naked. I feel like this idea of an anxiety about success and like pressure that we put on ourselves really, at the end of the day, is kind of silly, because we really are just like these little animals that are living on a planet that is being shot through the universe. And I think we kind of lose that perspective and that kind of silliness in a way that does make it harder to kind of ground ourselves. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much.
Yeah.
This isolated feeling does not have to last. You may not realize it, but you are surrounded by people who care for you. And there are resources out there that can guide you to be more connected with those around you. Fear of seeking help is and should always be a forgotten part of our society. Being alone can be great, but feeling alone can be harrowing. You are not alone.